welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. This is episode 123. Oh my goodness. And we are the Who Dat Jedi Council. Dave, Fredo, how you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing good.
And
Doing good.
let's see here. So Dave went on vacation, and Brittany and I took care of Lucy, their German Shepherd, and she was awesome here. And my two older dogs are getting a little annoyed by the younger dog who's trying to play with them like she played with Lucy. She misses her play because Lucy would put up with it. Lucy would put up with it better than Luna and Ellie. But and then Fredo, you've been driving all over or flying and everywhere all over heck and gone. You've been to basically the entire southeast, haven't you?
Yeah, I went to Florida for a conference, then came back, and then drove to Texas for 4th of July to see some family, with some family.
The Alfredo Narvaez World Tour, right?
At least the southern tour. Northern tour coming later.
Yeah, and of course 4th of July, it was actually far fewer booms this year on the 4th of July than in previous years, which is nice because one of my dogs gets really ticked off at fireworks. That used to be my thing until we moved to New Orleans, is that like every year, I guess, I don't know, the statute of limitations are probably gone, but my brother-in-law and I would drive from Nebraska to Missouri because like everything was outlawed in Nebraska, but Missouri had everything. And so we'd drive to Missouri singing, the song from Smokey and the Bandit. And then just because I would just keep my lesson money and gig money, just make a fireworks fund. Yeah, so we got plenty of stories, especially one where I'm just going to stop the stories there. That'll be for maybe when we get a Patreon. I'll tell about the times that for example, when I shot a bottle rocket over a motorcycle cop's head. So that happened. And so anyway.
Totally appreciated it, I'm sure.
Well, and I ended up talking about it with him later. So it was kind of funny. So 4th of July has passed. I have to tell you guys, I am hooked on a new YouTube channel, and that is Adam Savage's channel. A guy from Mythbusters, and he was a prop maker for ILM for a time. And Fredo, I have to tell you this story. I played the video for Dave. This is a Star Wars story. Adam was hired by Master Replicas to come up with a design for the thermal detonator from Return of the Jedi. And so he's telling the stories because one of the videos on his YouTube channel is he's showing around his home office, and he's showing the Master Replica's thermal detonator. He said, and so I called the guy who hired me and said, he's like, "Hey Tom, this is Adam." Said, "I should have the prototype for the thermal detonator ready for you on Monday, so we should be good to go." Hung up the phone, and like a couple days later, he got a call and said, "This is Agent so and so from the FBI." And he was like, "Seriously, who is this?" He says, "No, sure, this is the FBI." I said, "I'm like an explosives expert, and are you making a thermal detonator?" And he's like, "Seriously, who is this?" I assure you, this is the FBI. He said, get to the end of it. He left a message on the machine. Well, first of all, the agent says, "Let me tell you what I think is going on." He said, I'm a bomb specialist or explosive specialist here in the office that I don't know what a thermal detonator is, never heard of one. So when I Googled it, I found out that it was something from Return of the Jedi. When I Googled your name, I found out that you used to make props for and worked for Industrial Light and Magic. Said, so I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm guessing that you're developing a prop replica of the thermal detonator. And he said, "Yeah, but how did you figure this out?" He said, "Well, you left the message on somebody else's machine, and they like totally freaked out thinking that there was some terrorist attack coming or something, so they called the FBI."
Oh, jeez.
I was like, that's awesome. But if you watch Adam Savage's videos, oh my goodness, he like does his own makes his own lightsabers, shows how. I said it. I told Brittany, I said it's really good thing that I have no skills in like woodworking or metals or anything like that, because oh my god, that would be so dangerous.
You'd have a whole shop in your backyard just devoted to things you can make and to blow up, burn, or electrify, which
Well, I mean,
would be fun.
the things that he makes, like I said, these he makes replicas of props from all different movies, and but like I said, I have no skill in that whatsoever. So anyway, so yeah, check out Adam Savage's YouTube channel. It's really good. Anything you guys been geeking out over? Just since we haven't talked in a couple weeks.
I've been playing Breath of the Wild like gangbusters. That game is dangerous, man. You can
You
put
can lose hours.
you can put 3 hours into that game and think you've been playing for 30 minutes. It's just you just lose track of all time. I know it's not for everyone, that particular style of open world game, but I've been loving it. I think it's an incredible game.
Is this
Hmm.
how you decompress after many hours in the car with the
Oh,
kids?
well, yeah, no, like honestly, it's really good for that because there's certain games you play and you're like, I'm gonna go kill zombies or play Doom or whatever, and it's like blowing off steam. This is more about like zenning out a little bit. It's a very sort of peaceful existence. There's monsters trying to kill you and etc. But
Well, of
um,
course, that's peaceful.
Yeah.
but you can find a little peaceful corner somewhere and just hang out on a hill and watch scenery for a while, or cook yourself a meal or
Like
whatever.
Thanos, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey,
A grateful universe.
I have a question, and I'm sorry, Fredo, to step on you. It's what you've been geeking out, but I sent Scott Colesby a text, and he hasn't responded back. I have a question because it's been like they've been playing all the Marvel movies on TNT, and the week before that it was all the Star Wars movies, and so naturally those are the things that I watched. So I have a question for the two of you. Is there only one soul stone, or does anybody who makes their way to Vormir and chucks somebody they love over the side, do they get a soul stone?
I think it's only one because otherwise anybody could, there'd be an infinite supply of. But I also think it's designed to be so rare and so difficult to get that not everybody would, first of all, finding your way to Vormir is rare, and then, being willing to go through what it requires to get the Soul Stone.
But
Like it's
then,
meant to be rare.
but then, if the Hulk says that no, if you go into the past, it does not affect your future because it is your future. So then, when Hawkeye and Black Widow go to Vormir, shouldn't the Soul Stone then be gone because it was already taken by Thanos before them?
No, he took it after them.
No, he took it. If you go by
Yeah.
Hulk's reasoning, that even though you're going back to 1955 in the DeLorean, that's still in your future. So then it
Yeah,
should
but
be.
you're predating the event of him actually having taken
I'm
it.
just saying there are plot holes all over in these Marvel movies.
The funny part of that whole, rigmarole or whatever you want to call it is the idea that Captain America was going to return the Soul Stone. So what happens then? So first of all, he has to go meet up with Red Skull again, who was like his arch nemesis, and then, assuming the two of them don't try to kill each other, he's just going to put it back. Does he get the soul back at that point?
And whose soul does he get back?
Doesn't
I
get,
don't
yeah,
know.
he doesn't get Natasha's back because she's clearly gone, and she doesn't get
This is the kind of
Nick
nerdy conversations that get in people in like us in bar fights. This would this. Anyway,
or get people throwing us out of bars.
maybe that's
I maintain that would be a great movie. Captain America returning all of the stones.
I
Hmm.
I still want an answer to that. So those of you listening here, you can chime in on Twitter or whatever. Let me know. Is there only one Soul Stone, or again, if you show up to Vormir and chuck somebody you love over the side, do you get a Soul Stone?
Yeah.
So now the problem is that there's only one of the others. So to collect the whole set, you're still maybe the Soul Stone is like the one, when we all went to Burger King to try to get the collect them all so you can get your special prize at the end. There was one that you had a gazillion of, and then
Right.
one that was the chase. So anyway, so Fredo, anything you've been geeking out over?
I was just gonna say I've been rewatching. I don't know if you guys watched Dragon Ball Z back when it was in its heyday, back when it kind of premiered and made its way to American whatever. About a decade or so ago, about 12 years ago, a group of YouTube guys did this thing called Dragon Ball Z Abridged, which is just a 10-minute version of the episode that was in a way closer to what the manga voiceover was, but they also made it a bit more PG-13, sometimes close to R, because they did have a few curse words and did have a few intonations about stuff. And they only did it through the first 60 episodes of Dragon Ball Z, and I've been laughing my head off just watching it because they find ways in which to uh to spin characters that you see, oh, they're fun and lovable, whatever, and they're like, oh no, like somebody comes out saying, I am the hype, like that gets said, and it's I've been having a fun time just rewatching it because I'd forgotten I'd seen it, like I said, like 10, 12 years ago, back at the start of YouTube's era.
Right on, right on. Um, yeah, and I guess I was going to say one more thing, but we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Let's just do quick trivia, throwing it around the horn here to get our brains back wrapped around Star Wars. Dave, I'm going to start with you. Who does the Chancellor recommend to command the Jedi expedition to capture General Grievous?
Anakin
Oh
Skywalker.
my God! Yeah, right. Okay, Anakin Skywalker it is.
Mm.
All right, and this is easy tonight. All right, Fredo.
Yep.
What planet is the site of Mace Windu's final battle?
Coruscant.
It is Coruscant. And the funny thing is, did you guys see Sam Jackson's tweet? Said they're bringing everybody
Mhm.
else back. I'm ready to learn how to fight left-handed. And he's
Yeah.
holding his lightsaber. And
There
You
you go.
never saw a dead body, so it's all up. It's available.
Darth Maul gets cut in half. We saw him get cut in half, and he came back. So Mace Windu can come back from an arm. All right, and to me, who absorbs Count Dooku's Force lightning with his lightsaber? That is the gentleman who we're going to be talking about a little bit tonight, and that's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hello there.
Yeah, so before we get to the news, just so you know what we're going to be talking about tonight, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think I haven't watched every episode, but I've watched the last one a couple times, and we got to talking about what did this series, how did it answer some questions, make some things, or answer some questions, or make things better in watching and thinking about the saga movies, and what did it not help out so much, or maybe add more questions. So we're just going to kind of look at it from that angle, talk about characters and situations and things like that. But first, we got some news. So
So just right quick to mention, since we're going to start, talk about Obi-Wan, I guess we should just mention that everybody liked it, or at least everybody saw it. So viewing figures that were released by Disney Plus and Lucasfilm.
that is a big
state
distinction, isn't it? I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's a big
No,
distinction, whether they liked it or they saw it. So all we know is that a lot of people saw it. But anyway, go ahead.
right. Yeah, no. So the season one finale of Obi-Wan drew a 5-day audience. So from Wednesday's premiere through that Sunday, of 1.8 million household, which is 20% higher than the Wednesday through Sunday finale of Book of Boba Fett, which was the 1.5 million households had. So basically, they were just, I think they said something like 100 million minutes of it were watched, a certain time. Put it simply, it was like the biggest thing Disney Plus has ever seen, record breaking. Everybody's thrilled about the reception that it got. Just particularly that finale, it was just everybody was ready to watch it and watched it and then watched it again.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it'll be interesting uh, to see if there's any sort of stats they can get on what people thought of it.
Hmm.
So, but I mean,
I maybe like you could at least look at how long they lasted with the series. Like, did they watch versus how many people watched episode 1 versus episode 6? That'd give you an idea. Like, if you stuck it out, maybe
Yeah.
you were more inclined to liking it. I
You
don't know.
know, and I was listening to another podcast, and they were, it was the Resistance broadcast, and they were talking about, well, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, I think, well, Taika Waititi was talking about his Star Wars movie that he hasn't really actually even started writing yet, um, and so they're, you know, they're one of the people's on the podcast were saying that, it was Lacey. She said her speculation is that, you know, Kathleen Kennedy is like going, yeah, we want to make movies, but hey, you take your time, just get what you want written. We're in no rush here because we're killing it on Disney Plus.
That makes sense.
And
I'll
you
go
know, I
for
mean,
that.
if you're getting, you know, if you're getting paid, you know, and people like it, I mean, it's like, why bust your hump on, you know, a movie? You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's not. We don't have to get too deep into this, but it's an interesting theory.
No, I think there's some merit to it, particularly because we know not only that they have Obi-Wan, but they also have Mandalorian coming, Andor coming, Ahsoka coming. So there's a lot of product coming down the pipeline for Star Wars. So there's not going to be too long of a gap between for fans to wait for the next project. So if they know that they want to get the movies right, so that there's no more backlashes, the easiest thing to do is just say, okay, Taika, take your time. We know that you're making Thor, you were doing other stuff. Knock that out of the park, and then come in and knock this one out the park too. And you know, we'll still there'll still be enough to keep fans happy until you get ready for that.
I think in the short term, that's a very true statement. What you said, they're killing it. They're doing wonderfully. People are watching. That's great. Um, where I would suggest maybe a cautionary note would be the story of Netflix and where they're at right now.
Yeah.
They sort of maxed out on subscribers and then started making poor business choices at that point as a way to try to squeeze more blood out of the turnip.
Yeah, but
And
you
they had
didn't.
already.
But Netflix doesn't have Marvel and Star Wars as two of the walls of their house. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think it would be a lot different if we were getting the Ewok movie, you know, quality stuff. We're getting movie quality on my iPad, you
I
know.
don't disagree with any
And
of that.
so, you know, so
But
I don't disagree with you
yeah,
either, but I'm saying that,
yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily apples and oranges, but it's like red apples and green apples because I mean, like I said, Netflix is kind of like it's the end of Indiana Jones, right? I mean, it's like the warehouse that has all the things, and you go to Disney Plus and you know that they have the pillars up at the top. It's Disney, it's Marvel, it's Star Wars, it's National Geographic, and you know, so
I guess what I would ask,
and that's
right?
why everybody goes to Disney Plus is for National Geographic.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah, absolutely. That's it. But what I would ask you is what happens when they top out, when they max out on subscribers? Was like, okay, well, we'll raise our rates, which again you can do to a certain degree, and like you said, a lot of the hardcore fans will just pay whatever so they can get their Star Wars show or their Marvel show or whatever. Um, but I don't know how sustainable that is long term.
I think as long as you have people having children, that there are always going to be new Disney Plus subscribers because that is with all due respect, that is the world's best babysitter is the fact that you can put on the latest Disney cartoon and a kid can and watch it right there. I don't think Star Wars and Marvel is going to be what's going to keep it going long term. I think it has everything to do with the Disney Vault and
Well, like
and
again, like
kids.
I'm just talking about from a stock market perspective, right? They have to show growth. They have to show that we're making more money. And I think that there is a subscriber base that you eventually will max out. And so
And I
at
think it's going to be
point,
replenished.
and then at that point you start running into some trouble. And I think like I'll go on the record right now and say that I think like that's in the future. I don't know how far into the future that is, but I think at some point they will reach that point of saturation. They'll have raised prices a couple of times, and then what do you do? Disney Plus two. I mean, like I don't know that I don't know that like pinning your hopes to streaming long term makes sense. It needs to be kind of ancillary by its very format. And I think like the feature films are going to have to return at some point.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think in some ways I would compare it to ESPN, where uh, they've tried to do a lot of original programming with varying degrees of quality. But the hook that they have, the reason why they spend so much money on live sports is because that's the one thing they have that everybody is after. That's the reason why the SEC is going to ESPN exclusively. Is the reason why Monday Night Football is spending so much money to get Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, because they know ultimately that's what's driving the caboose. That's what's driving the train. And for Disney Plus, you're right. I mean, at some point they're gonna have to consider what's the maximum rate on their return. What's the most they can put in before they have to either make drastic changes or up prices. And it's interesting because yeah, at this point it's not an issue. At some point it might be. And look, there may be discussions within Disney, Lucasfilm, Marvel about how much more can we saturate things, how much can we stave off stuff for
Well,
the theater for the before we need to have stuff in theaters, because we also know, I mean, stuff hits theaters and then 90 days later it's in streaming.
so it's interesting that you bring this up. And we don't
Mhm.
need to belabor this even more, but
Yeah.
you know Disney Plus is not just about original content. It's
Hmm.
it's
The
I mean,
vault.
it's a server where you can go and watch your favorite stuff. Because actually, when watching those Marvel movies on TNT, it was like, or TBS or whatever it was, at the bottom there was this thing that kept popping up. It's like, hey, are you liking watching Captain America? Because you can watch it on Disney Plus without commercials and stuff like that. So maybe there is a little bit of worry there. Maybe they're trying to get some people, but I mean, I mean, I think that they're going to keep getting my money, for example, because even if I
Mhm.
stop watching, I'm done with Disney Plus. That's when they're going to come out with, hey, now we've got this new Star Wars thing. It's like, oh darn it, I'm going to go give them my $60 or whatever it is, or eventually I'm sitting here with a couple cabinets full of DVDs and and CDs. Ask me the last time I opened one of those cabinets.
Oh no,
You know what I
take it
mean?
from some.
So I think it will be interesting to watch. I totally get your point, um, but my hope is that if you want to keep people coming back, it's like don't put everything in Disney Plus.
Mhm.
Like have your new Star Wars stuff and then taper it off. Then all of a sudden, hey kids, we got a movie out in the theater. And it's like, oh yeah, we got to go to the theater, and then the next new thing is on Disney Plus. So it's like, oh crap, I got to go back to Disney Plus and watch stuff there. Then
You
three,
almost
four
want
years
them to.
later, have
Yep.
another thing in the theater. It's like, but yeah. So anyway, like I said,
No,
I'm
I was
sorry to
gonna.
hijack the news there, but that was
No, I was just gonna finish. I was gonna say they could follow the WWE model where they'd have the weekly Monday Night Raw stuff, and then all the stuff culminates at WrestleMania 49.95 on pay-per-view. You know, that was the old model that they used to follow, where
no
all they would always be building up towards the big pay-per-view
works
event, and
for
they
them.
could be like that.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, where they just build towards the movie. Speaking of Disney Plus and TV shows, Empire Magazine came out with the latest issue, and they had a whole bunch of stuff on Andor, but they also had an interview with Rosario Dawson and Nicole Burdisso regarding Ahsoka. So there's a couple of quotes I just want to throw out there. They're asking Rosario about Ahsoka's character, and she goes, quote, "There have been two instances where she has shown up on a mission, so far in live action. You see how she's interacting with folks, but you don't really get her per se. Even fans who've lived with her for so long don't know where she's at now in this journey." Whereas Bordiso said when they asked her about Sabine, she goes, "Sabine is so fearless and brave with so much grace, but she still has flaws. She's making mistakes, and it's very high stakes in this galactic war to make mistakes. and it's great for audiences that have seen Rebels, but we got a standalone chapter as it is. So, they're obviously trying to hint at the fact that it's been years since we've seen these characters. They're not necessarily going to be the same that you last remember from that Rebels finale. So, I wonder how people are going to take it when that finally comes down.
Did you just quote her as saying that there's a galactic war or galactic conflict going on?
I did. That was part of her quote.
Yeah. That's an interesting nugget to me because like if this is set during The Mandalorian, that's not really true necessarily.
Well, is it?
I mean,
Is it?
Supposed to be, I thought, because she's searching for Thrawn.
Well, she's searching for Thrawn, but is it set during the Mandalorian? Of
that's
course,
my point. Yeah.
and
That's
the First Order started coming. Yeah, man, we have to do our research on this one to figure that out. But that
yeah.
that is an interesting
Once again,
grenade that was dropped there.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Because it could, I mean, it could very well mean that maybe the show starts off towards the end of the Return of the Jedi period, and then we spring forward. Or it could mean that maybe they're still caught up in fighting the remnants of the Empire. It could mean any number of things. I think that's kind of what's interesting is
mhm.
we have some sort of idea of what we're gonna get out of Ahsoka, but we might all be wrong.
chances are we're all going to be wrong.
But yeah, remnants of the Empire likely, Thrawn eventually, very likely. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's probably where we're headed at minimum.
Hmm. Moving on right quick. Speaking and I'll just drop this nugget right here. They're mentioning, of course, mention Sabine and Ahsoka. We should mention that their former running mate in Rebels, Caleb Doom, aka Kanan Jarrus's lightsaber, is coming to Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities for purchase whenever you visit Galaxy's Edge.
It's interesting that they're saying Caleb Doom.
Right, they're not saying Kanan
They're not
Jarrus.
saying Kanan Jarrus.
I wonder if that's just to differentiate because Kanan's to separate. And I mean, I've only seen the mock-ups and the images. We haven't
so,
seen
so
anybody
you
try
don't,
to separate it
so you don't go back to Doc Ondar and say, "I want my money back. This doesn't come apart."
because that's part of the selling point of that lightsaber. I mean, the fact that it broke into two pieces, you could put it away. But I don't know if the technology is there to allow Disney Imagineers to do that.
I can get two lightsabers right now that I can take the top off and
Hmm.
show you. I mean, yes, the technology's there. They can do it.
Yeah, they could screw. They just they put the kyber crystal in a slightly different
Dave, it's a
location.
really good thing this isn't a video podcast. Don't use
Yeah.
your hand gestures, all right?
Ah,
Do
it's
not play with your lightsaber on the podcast.
okay. I'm sorry, everyone.
But
But
no, they could very well do that. So, however, it could. The more things that detach, the more easily they stop working.
break. Yep.
So yeah. But
More
anyway,
Or
moving.
can
It's
be
like it's look under the roof of your car,
right.
and you're gonna see that at
I'm
work.
also gonna say if you want to build a model where you're always getting money, build stuff that breaks apart and pieces get lost. Invariably, you're gonna have to go look online for the replacement.
Here's the thing, though, about okay, when I was at Doc Ondar's and I'm looking at and I watched videos of what lightsabers are in stock and stuff like that. It's like who's in the meeting room that says, okay, what lightsabers should we make, and who's the person that says Luminaras? Let's make Luminara, and it's like who's the nerd that's coming up with like some of these, and again, not Kanan Jarrus, but let's make Caleb Dooms, or let's make these obscure Jedi masters that we actually never see their lightsabers. Maybe that's why they do it, because then you can't come back and say that they did it wrong. Anyway, it's just kind of weird. It's like, to me, the as a person who just had bought the Skywalker saber from Disney, UK, and had it sent over by our friend Larry. I mean, make Obi-Wans, make Darth Vader's, which they do, make Luke Skywalker's, make those, especially those saga lightsabers, and those are the ones people will buy tons of.
Hmm.
But anyway, We don't have to spend more time on that.
Yeah, I mean, like you're mostly right. I mean, like those are the big sellers, right? But there is some niche appeal to some of the smaller characters who have the Ezra's one is always I found really interesting. His first one that had the
Yeah,
gun
yeah.
attached. Yeah,
You can get
I
that as
kind
a
of like that.
toy. You can get that as a toy, but
Yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah, no, I the minute that the Obi-Wan lightsaber from A New Hope is available on Doc Ondar's, then I might, anytime I have somebody going to Disney World, that's where I might send money with them. Because that's another one I
Oh yeah,
like. But I did
I
have a
was just
problem
thinking.
with. I told you I had a problem with the Luke Skywalker one. It didn't look right to me. So that's
The
I've been.
Return of the Jedi one.
Yeah, it didn't look right. Something didn't sit right with me. So
Is it is it the one that breaks apart that you just have to screw on the other? Oh, you can't see is that the one that breaks apart and you tie on the another piece to connect the saber blade?
I didn't see that. No, I don't know.
Okay, never mind. No, I was just thinking, Doc Ondar should have a button that everybody presses as they buy a lightsaber that just quotes General Grievous. Your lightsaber will make a fine addition to my collection.
yeah, it's like, or have the Pokemon sign. Collect them all.
That's right.
All
That's right.
right.
Right quick, we'll mention that today there was a trailer that dropped for behind the scenes show called Light and Magic, which is going to be on Disney Plus starting July 27th, and it's behind the scenes about industrial light and magic. So if you're any kind of geek of the last 40 some odd years, you want to see how all the magic got made, they're going to take you behind the scenes and show you.
Can't wait. This is the kind of stuff that I love Disney Plus for. I love these types of things. One of my favorite shows on Disney Plus is Imagineering, where they go,
Hmm.
they're talking about, yeah, I love things like this. So I wish there was more Star Wars stuff like this. Um, anyway,
This kind of stuff used to be like the add-on for the DVD,
right.
like, and it
Hmm.
would help encourage people to buy the DVDs. Well, I got to watch the behind-the-scenes thing, and so this is kind of a similar deal, and just another reason to subscribe to Disney Plus.
And it's not going to be all Star Wars. It's all the stuff ILM's been working on.
Yep.
So I hope that they
Which,
talk. I hope they have one episode where they talk about the gopher from Caddyshack, because ILM was responsible for the gopher in Caddyshack.
will they have a whole episode dedicated to Phil Tippett and Jurassic Park?
They could,
There were
and
rap,
I mean,
there
they
were
could
rappers in the kitchen. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, the early days of the CGI stuff with the Abyss
Yep.
was another one.
Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there were a lot of really cool things.
Yeah.
And they could just yeah, tell us the history. I'm a nerd for that too.
I think one of the biggest things that's going to hit us is just how much progress got made in from say 77 with the original Star Wars to now, because we really underestimate just how many leaps and bounds got taken just because we just lived through them. Hey, yeah, we can do this on the computer, but that wasn't necessarily the case.
And on a tangent, before we move on to the last news story, I was again watching Star Wars on TBS. I was watching Return of the Jedi, and I found myself just staring at when the Emperor arrives on the Death Star, and knowing that about 80% of that wide shot of the Death Star hangar is a matte painting.
Hmm.
It's not CGI. It's a painting that they then put live people on top of, and you cannot even it's
It's
not one
set
of
up
those
to a
things.
movie screen.
It doesn't,
Like
there's times in Return of the Jedi when it's like, okay, that's a fake background, like when Lando and Han are talking before Han takes off in the shuttle and Lando takes the Falcon. The background there looks awful, but this one, it's like there are so many times in Star Wars where it's like, that's a matte painting. I can't believe that.
Mhm.
So anyway, no, I can't wait for this. This will be awesome.
Yep, yep. So, final bit of news, and it's not Star Wars, it's Marvel. Thor: Love and Thunder. Speaking of, Taika Waititi, and dropped today. Well, it's officially out tomorrow, but early screens have already come out. Reviews are popping up everywhere.
Oh,
So Rotten Tomatoes had a rated fresh at 69%. So nice.
We're going to see it tomorrow. Um, and I saw one tweet today where it said, or article where it says, this is the best Thor movie. So my bar
Oh
has
no.
been set, and now I'm gonna go in all cynical, and they're gonna have to prove me. They're gonna have to prove it to me if they say this is the best Thor movie.
Well, the reviews, as Fredo alluded to, are only at around 70%, which is not super high where the MCU is concerned. Most of the movies fall well above that.
So,
So,
Actually, Ragnarok. I mean, Ragnarok was pulling
mm-hmm.
in the '90s, if I'm late high '80s, low '90s. So
Well,
this is
but
a nice.
is this a little bit too? Is it a little bit too much Rodney Dangerfield? You know what I mean? Because
That's the
okay,
question. Yeah.
because here's my point: is for while watching all these Marvel movies, during the Fourth of July weekend, I watched the Avengers and the Thor in the first Avengers movie is a much different character than the Thor in Endgame.
Hmm.
And so now and also the Thor and Ragnarok. You start seeing the character totally changes, and Chris Hemsworth and everybody and the directors making those movies, they change that character a bunch. And now is it like, so maybe it was refreshing with Thor Ragnarok, and then with Endgame it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of nice, but it's getting a little, now maybe it's a little bit too much Rodney Dangerfield.
And I think that was one of the questions because I saw at least one review that said basically it's Ragnarok, and if you like Ragnarok, this is pretty much like Ragnarok Part Two. So I'm trying to remember what it's like. They're like, if Ragnarok was Led Zeppelin, this is Led Zeppelin 2. So you're getting more of the same, maybe tighter, maybe more focused. But it's gonna be interesting to see. I'm gonna try to go see it sometime this weekend, see if how it is. Maybe we can talk about it next week. But and then we can discuss about maybe Natalie Portman coming back, coming to Star Wars.
Good Lord. All right. Yeah. Okay. So this was funny. I was reading. I sent you guys this article today because first thing I do when I wake up, if I don't go for a run, well, after I'm done with my run, if I don't go on a run, so it's the first thing I do. First I play Wordle. Then I
Mhm.
go through my Google News brief, and there was this article. Taika Waititi asked Natalie Portman asked, "So what are you working on next?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this Star Wars thing. I gotta, start." He said, "Have you ever wanted to be in a Star Wars movie?" And she's like, "I've been in Star Wars movies." It's like
Kind of, sorta. I mean, you
this.
may have
This
missed them.
reminded me. Sorry, this reminded me of the time when I was a band director and I was helping out with the eighth grade band. And the band director said, "Hey, Aaron, will you help Katie down to the lunchroom?" Katie was a flute player and she was totally blind, and so I was like, "Sure." So she had a hold of my arm and we're walking down to the cafeteria. And Katie says, "So she said, usually my friend Marianne helps me to the lunchroom." I said, "Oh, really? What does she look like?" And there's this pause, and Katie says, "I don't know." I'm just like, ugh. I'm sorry. It's just like, just,
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, so now Taika Waititi, either you're totally distracted by all the things you got going on, or is it possible that he did not see the prequels?
or that he could be trolling her as well, because this is right in his wheelhouse. This is his style of humor to just
Hmm.
make that kind of joke, right?
Somebody
At the
needs
I mean,
prequel's expense.
somebody needs to pin him down. Actually, and the way that you pin him down is you start like asking, you get a trivia game going, and make it all prequel questions. So anyway, but yeah, that was just kind of a funny anecdote. So either way, Thor. All right, well, best Thor movie. I'll let you know what I think when I get home tomorrow night.
Hey, let the record state that I have said no such thing about this movie to ruin it for you this time around. But I'm gonna go see it this weekend too. Um, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think even if it's a tire fire, it'll be an entertaining tire fire.
See, and that's the thing with any. Again, I've said it before. I appreciate the people that it's just like, hey, have you seen this new movie? No. What'd you think about it? Yeah, it was all right. Just give a benign, like, don't say that you hate it or that it was the best thing ever, because that's only going to that does affect everybody. You go in, especially because I trust, I trust Dave's opinion very much. I trust Fredo's opinion very much. And if you were to say this is the greatest thing ever, and then I go in and it's not the greatest thing ever, I'm like, what'd you do to me? You know what I mean? It's like, but if you set the bar at, yeah, it's pretty good, then I'm not going to be. It's uh, the best Thor movie. Okay, well, here we go. It's the funniest movie since Animal House. Okay, gotcha. Man, okay, we need to move on because I'm going to start drinking more and I'm going to start getting more mad.
On the same topic, briefly, I will mention that I finally saw Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, so we can speak freely about that. I don't know if we need to dedicate a whole episode to that or not.
Give me a chance to watch it again because there's a lot of stuff that I missed and I was kind of, I need to go back and watch it again. It's on Disney Plus.
I think that movie is the poster child for having to do your homework or having to do the summer reading. I mean, it's just I didn't think it was a Doctor Strange movie because what happened to him over the course of the movie? I mean, not a lot. I mean, not really. Oh well. Anyway.
Well, I think we should talk. I think we should talk about it on an episode sometime because there's the opinion that I'm inclined to agree with. Not just because it's my wife's opinion, but for other. But we could take some issues with the way that they've portrayed Wanda, and the way that they've kind of run that character, kind of into the ground.
Yeah, no, they took her straight from. Flawed hero into now I'm straight evil.
Right.
And yeah.
So, anyway. All right. Obi-Wan, what has made things a little bit more clear? What has helped, I suppose, the movies and things that have come before it? And what areas have we do we still have some questions, or is maybe it made things worse? I think maybe a good way to start with this, if you guys don't mind, let's just go through the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
And what? Because I'm talking Obi-Wan, Leia, Owen, and Beru. Let's talk about those saga, and Darth Vader as well. Those saga characters that are main characters in this series. So let's just go straight up. First of all, Obi-Wan. What things in this series elevated his character? And we can talk about both of them as well. Elevated or made it a little bit more, like I said before, things that make you go, didn't make things any clearer. What do you think about Obi-Wan?
I'll start us off just by saying that I think most of the characters that you just listed we have a richer understanding of now. Period. There was more to digest. There was more to see and observe and understand. And I was all for that in a very general way. And so I really can't fault the story when it came to any of them. I'd even throw Luke and Bale in, because we got a little bit of those two, and again appreciated what we saw. When it comes to the main characters, I have several thoughts about the story and the portrayal and things of that nature. But I just wanted to kind of lead with that. I appreciated getting what we got.
Some interesting things. It seemed to, you started seeing Obi-Wan become less of the arrogant fart smelling Jedi from the prequels and more of the kind of Qui-Gon, the Force is, the living Force type of a character that we got from Alec Guinness. I think you started seeing there is a mentality shift there. Some kind of things that really hit harder now. We've shared the meme and it's been around a bunch. That moment in A New Hope now when Obi-Wan's fighting Vader and he looks over and he sees Luke and Leia running to the Falcon and he gives a smirk. And I've always, as everybody has, interpreted that as like, yeah, okay, this is going to get Luke down the road and he's going to own all of you. So here we go and go ahead and slice me down. But it's like the meme is like Obi-Wan seeing the twins together for the first time in 19 years. And that's just like, because of his interaction with Leia in this in this series, because of, his, the brief interaction with Luke. And then it's obviously, it just hits harder right there. So.
Off the top, I would agree with all that. Both what both of you guys said. Just because we're talking about, we're getting an opportunity to glance at characters that we kind of know. I mean, like I said, the good thing that the prequels did is they left you off at a point where, had you seen nothing else, you could see where they connect to episode 4. Getting this series actually allows you a bit more breathing room. You're seeing that these were not static characters. Obi-Wan didn't go into the desert and just chill there for 18 years, wait for somebody to come and break glass to get him out of there. He was living, breathing. I love the juxtaposition of him at the start, broken and defeated. I think that was part of the thing that I really appreciated about the shows because it allows you. I mean, talk about looking backwards. In terms of how we saw Luke's failure at in Last Jedi versus seeing now Obi-Wan's failure here, where he's living with everything that went wrong. And I think if anything else, it allowed us to kind of go, okay, he, you know, there was stuff that he wouldn't have known if he had just stayed in Tatooine. So now we know how he knew it. So it does give you that. It gives you an opportunity to gain further understanding of the characters, which I always appreciate. This isn't a static story. These aren't archetypes. They start off that way, but then they branch off into new things.
Now, the thing that I did that made me feel a little bit better as well is because I remember buying my Ben Kenobi action figure back in the 70s and being very confused as why does he have two names? Why does he have two names? Now, the Clone Wars get into it a little bit when that one arc where he goes by the code name Ben. But the fact that Owen and Beru are always referring to him as Ben. And that explains then why Luke doesn't know that there's a difference between Ben and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like, how do you, so anyway, I thought that this series did a good job at, guess, making that a little bit more easy to accept, because otherwise it's like, how do you not know that Obi-Wan Swoboda and Aaron Swoboda are the same people? You know what I mean? It's one of those things, because it's not everybody's walking around and everybody knows a Kenobi. But Luke grew up with hearing Ben and hearing people on Tatooine talk about Ben Kenobi, and it was that name was used a bunch in this series. So that, I mean, and that seems like a minor thing, but it does. I think it has now made the story more cohesive.
We added to, I think, like Luke not seeing the lightsaber, right, was a really kind of key moment when Reva was chasing him through the desert. He doesn't see the lightsaber, so that when he sees a lightsaber later on, it's still a big deal. They did a lot of little things like that. They paid a lot of notice to that original movie to make sure that they didn't like ruin it for us old fogies who are like devoted to this stuff. So, um, absolutely appreciated those kinds of small details, like you said. Circling back to what Fredo was talking about with Obi-Wan himself, um, this is just a lovely character study of a man who's lost everything, and he has to pick himself up from that, and that's a really sort of worthwhile story. It's not a new story, but it makes you feel good when you see it. And so, like, anytime you get to see that kind of story play out, I think is great. And then if you have an emotional attachment to that character to begin with, if it's somebody that you're already familiar with, I think it becomes that much more powerful. A lot of the most powerful acting moments that came about in this series were Ewan playing this iconic role again, which again is another point in the favor of this series existing in the first place. Um, but just doing such a wonderful job of conveying all of these different emotions that he's going through. Um, and again, this idea of I've lost everything. How do I respond to that? And it's contrasted against the same theme taking place for Anakin and Reva at the same time. And so you contrast Obi-Wan's response to this situation to these people who've given in to their evil impulses at the same time. And again, on that level alone, I think it's a very, very worthwhile story to have experienced.
One of the things that actually I was just thinking about that this show does really well, and going to Aaron's point and to yours as well, Dave, is the idea of characters becoming new people. Like we know that, Anakin becomes Darth Vader, but it isn't just a becoming, it's a he sheds that old persona and becomes this menacing monster that walks around. Much the same way as Reva shed most of herself to become the third sister, and then her journey to finding her way back to who she was prior to all the trauma and stuff that she faced. But the core of that element for Obi-Wan to go from Obi-Wan to Ben, we've always kind of juxtaposed that, Ewan McGregor played Obi-Wan Kenobi and Alec Guinness played Ben Kenobi. But I think this is we got to see here where that transition kind of started, where, in some ways at the start of this series, he's still clinging on to that Obi-Wan sense of self. And by the end, he's accepted that he must let that go of that and embrace being Ben in order to be able to move on and serve what he needs to do.
So, what did the series do for that left you maybe still scratching your head or saying, come on, there's still some loose threads with Obi-Wan? Um, the one, the one that really that I was hoping for throughout this series, I wish we would have had that the communing with Qui-Gon would have been a little bit more of a crescendo rather than a big nothing burger and then all of a sudden Ghost Qui-Gon at the end. I mean, I would have been fine with Ghost Qui-Gon at the end if maybe there would have been some communing with Yoda to, I'm supposed to be doing this stuff to figure out. Now, I get it. They've set themselves up for season 2, how to become one with the Force. But what if Vader would have sliced him down, type of a deal. So I guess that is still a how did Obi-Wan, learn all this stuff and why all of a sudden is he ready to see Qui-Gon? That kind of still leaves some scratching.
They probably could have given us a little bit more with that, because I would agree with that. I kind of like the way that they did it, in the sense that this is the culmination of his hero's journey. He was not ready to see Qui-Gon until he was self-actualized, right? And until he had like returned from the brink of, trudging through the desert and with no meaning or purpose in his life. He had to find himself again. And once he had done that, that's when he was able to see Qui-Gon again. And so like within like the construct of the story and like and like that sort of lesson telling, I totally endorse the way that they did it. But again, to your point, maybe show him. I know it gets repetitive after a while, but maybe show him trying, not getting it a little bit more. I think we saw two scenes of that. Um, but you could have gotten a little bit more, and he didn't have to reveal himself in kind of a flippant way. It was a little bit like the lightsaber toss in Last Jedi. I mean, it was a little flippant at the end, and
Yeah.
it was like, oh, ha, ha. So
It
yeah,
makes me wonder. It makes me wonder if maybe they did it that way because they didn't know if they were going to be able to get Liam Neeson to come back until the very last minute. Like, because obviously you can totally tell now. Okay, it's a great ending, but I was also thinking that final shot between Ben and Luke, if maybe the hello there was meant to be the finale, the final moment. And then they went, oh, great, we got Liam to come back. Quick, shoot an extra scene just to kind of. And then they went back and filmed those extra moments where he's trying to commune with him. Because it makes sense from a production standpoint. If you don't know if you can get the guy back, don't hint at his presence.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Don't write that in as a major plot element if you don't know.
So okay, so let's move on. How about Leia? Because I would argue that actually this series did more for Leia and giving her more credibility and explaining more of her story in the especially the original trilogy. I'm not talking about the sequel trilogy, um, but I think this series did a bunch for Leia. And the first one out of the gate is the biggest plot hole ever was when, Luke asks, "What do you remember of your mother?" And she's like, and Leia remembers all this stuff about her mother. And it's like, if you were, how, and then you would see the prequels and you're like, how, what, where, why, how does she know all this stuff about her mother? But that one little scene with her and Obi-Wan, she looks at Obi-Wan, she says, "Are you my father?" And it's like, and because she is more of an empath, that she probably does have visions of, her force abilities. Maybe she does see scenes from her birth, so I think that scene alone, did wonders to fill that little hole. So what do you think
Can,
about Leia?
can I just add to that too? Like, the very scene at the end where Obi-Wan is talking to Leia and talking about the characteristics that she inherited from her mother, just reinforces the sort of vague, cloudy picture she might have had of the woman to begin with. And so when she later talks to Luke, what do you remember of your mother? It's like some of that conversation could be informed by that conversation that she has with Obi-Wan, where he describes her to her. And so like again, multiple scenes that sort of address that being an issue for people. I think that's great. And Little Leia in general, I really enjoyed.
Girl deserves an Emmy.
She did a really great job.
yep. Yeah, I think if one, in many ways, if we got the most out of Obi-Wan, I think Leia's the one who comes out looking the second best because it allows us to connect with her character in a way in which you can totally see why she ends up being the girl in charge of the plans at the start of episode 4. I was thinking of that moment in Rogue One where Bale says, "I got to get back to Alderaan," and it's like, that he says, "I would trust her with my life." When he's telling the other rebel leaders, "I would trust Leia with my life," and you're like, wait a minute, she's your daughter, and that's nice, and but she's an 18-year-old girl. And then you realize, no, she's somebody who because of her ordeals, has grown up a lot faster, thrown herself into the dedicated life of service that calls for much more than Han or Luke ever thought that they would sign up for it. She was, whereas say somebody like Luke got thrusted upon the stage, Leia chose to be there, and this is the point where you see her come into a realization that she needs to be involved because the forces, around them are not nice, and they will use little kids as pawns and or target practice. So I think she comes out amazing out of this.
Now, while the scene that I mentioned before was very well done and very subtle, and you know, the one that was more like a seventh grader asking another seventh grader to the school dance was at the very end when Obi-Wan says, well, when she says, "Will I ever see you again?" and Obi-Wan says, but we can't act like we know each other, basically, because it will be dangerous for both of us. It was very clunky, but it helped to explain why, you know, her message, on R2D2 was, General Kenobi, you know, I've heard that you served my father in the Clone Wars type of a deal. You're a guy that my dad's talked about, not that I went on this, whirlwind adventure with. So that was always kind of, in the original trilogy, and it was kind of awkward. And then, of course, when Luke rescues her and she goes, "Ben Kenobi," it's like, oh, you know him. It's like that was that. There's always been that kind of awkwardness. That little
Yeah.
scene, as clunky as it was, like I said, it was just clunky, but it was enough to say, and a little creepy to have it. Let's let this be our little secret, Leia. It was a little
Oh no.
creepy, but but it did help. It did help to say, we'd both be in trouble if we get it. So it was obvious that was they. I think they. It was obvious that the creators of this went and where are the holes in the dam that we do need to put a finger in. So
Yeah, and like to your point, is it sufficient? I don't know. She still seems somewhat unfamiliar and a little too formal with Ben at the beginning of A New Hope.
but by that
And
time she's a full-on spy. She's not just like, a naive little girl doing a thing for her dad. I think by that time she is like full on, almost fulcrum type of a deal.
Rebel agent, yeah.
So she's, when Vader said you are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor, when you know, he's true, he's accurate. But anyway, um,
General Kenobi, years ago, you served my father in the Clone Wars. It's like, just, I mean, like, yeah, and also, like, it's like, come on. So I think this series adds extra awkwardness to that whole relationship. Now it's like we're going to graft a relationship between these two um onto the movies. Cool. But now you've created a little bit of weirdness in some of the dialogue in episode 4. That having been said, we've talked about why does she name her kid Ben? It's like, well,
Yep.
now you got a good reason for that one.
But
uh,
also, I was just going to say right quick, but part of me was also thinking, just was yes, there's still the delivery in A New Hope seems awkward compared to what we know now. But it could just simply be a question of maybe the original idea was get him back to Alderaan, kind of help, connect him with the rebellion kind of thing, not, hey, my planet's going to get blown up and I'm going to be captured as. So I can forgive a lot of the clunkiness of that delivery because
I disagree.
it's
I'm
different.
sorry, I disagree with both of you
Mhm.
because if I knew with either one of you that if anybody caught wind of the fact that I knew who you were, that it could mean that you were going to be found and killed, that I would play it off like, all right, that we have never met each other before. I don't know who you are. And so I think this, because of that one little ad at the end, like I said, as clunky as it was, because of that one little ad of, we need to make sure that nobody ever knows that we know each other because it's dangerous for us both. That
I
that
don't
then
agree.
that explains that. So we
I don't agree.
we can agree to disagree. Let's move
Yeah.
on. How about Vader? Let's talk about Vader.
We got the monster back.
Oh, it makes the entry in Rogue One even more menacing, and the entry in A New Hope even more menacing. It's they they gave a lot of depth to that character.
I think one of the good things that they did is because we got to see the monsters. Because if you never notice in A New Hope, Vader's an enforcer. He's not the guy in charge. Tarkin's in charge. It's not the Empire till they start changing dynamics that Vader gets put above the Imperials. I mean, the Vader in A New Hope gets talked at by Imperial officers. In Empire, he's choking guys, and
So
I
is
think in
that
some
is
ways,
that maybe something that this series then still makes you scratch your head a little bit about when you watch A New Hope, because he is, after all that we've seen in Rogue One and in Kenobi with Vader and in Rebels, that when you get to A New Hope and he's being pushed around by a bunch of people, does that still make you kind of like, how is this guy getting pushed around?
yeah, it creates. That's one of those things where you feel like, okay, maybe they made a clunk here, maybe they didn't answer appropriately. I do love him. Just on the positive side, I love as much that we got as much as we did. I love that we finally got that acknowledgement from Anakin about his own failure in all this, because it's really, he didn't just blame everybody around him. He also blamed himself. He had enough time to, sit in the back of the tank and think what went wrong. But so that was really good. And I just, I love every moment with him on scene. I mean, look, he's the biggest movie villain of all time for a reason. It's great that we got all what we got with him.
When he's been partially demasked, there's that moment when he's having the back and forth with Obi-Wan, and there's his eyes change over the course of that scene, and I refuse to believe that that's a mistake or an error in eye makeup or whatever. It's like he goes Sith eyes, normal eyes, back to Sith eyes, pretty much, and it's kind of jarring because, and again, you see Ewan's reaction where his face sort of just like crumples up inside of itself, because I think he sees that glimmer, um and then it goes away, and like maybe in his own mind that's the moment where he truly lost his friend. um but it
It's
I mean, it's whew.
it's interesting you bring that up, because Star Wars Underworld podcast brought this up. They were talking about now watching the everything with Vader in it. Now it's going to be within the, you're going to have the thing going through your brain of who's speaking. Is it Anakin or is it Darth Vader?
Yeah,
Like in Return of the Jedi, is it at some point, it's like when he says it's too late for me, son. That's not Darth Vader talking. That's Anakin.
mm,
So it is almost this Moon Knight type of a thing. Um, but they've, so I don't know if they'll be, so I love what they were talking about, where it's like, yeah, now when you're watching this, or who's speaking, is it Darth Vader or is it Anakin Skywalker? So
We got more buildup of the myth, as we alluded to earlier, with the monster, ugh! And a couple of really wicked duels out of this situation, which I don't want to gloss over either. I thought they were both great.
how does it make you feel about the duel that they have in A New Hope?
I've always just been like, whatever with that. They're both old men. Whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, but
I can always, yeah,
I mean, and I've,
Yeah.
first of all, people, the thing that's been driving me nuts is that people are really concerned with the fact that how do we get from Ewan McGregor here to 8 years later, Alec Guinness. And it's like I've watched guys that I was a freshman in college with go bald. No, with all due respect, you know, by their senior year.
Look at pictures of me from 10 years ago.
So,
That's all I'll say about that.
but to go from that type of duel, which everybody wanted to see, to 8 years later, and arguably being stronger in the Force, both of them, to being like the old man fight in Family Guy. You know, there was, I don't think there was any way they're ever going to fix that unless they totally re-edit A New Hope.
Yeah.
But,
Yep.
you know,
that's it. That's the solution.
But I will say that because they weren't jumping around and leaping around and doing all sorts of, you know, episode 3 type stuff, that I think actually the duel helps lead us into that. Because let's face it, Obi-Wan's going back to Tatooine. He's going to be sitting around talking to Ghost Qui-Gon. You know, so it's not like he's going to be jogging, 5 miles a day.
Seriously, one of the smartest things they did was have Vader toy with Obi-Wan in that first duel. Because he's like, I'm so much more powerful than you, and you're clearly out of practice. And he's just basically one-handing the guy. Like, I own you. And he kind of returns to that sort of thing again by the time New Hope rolls around. He's like, well, I know. Again, either he recognizes it, he sees Obi-Wan's older, he sees Obi-Wan's out of practice, he thinks I have the upper hand, and he treats him as such, and that's kind of how that fight comes off, even though we know it's 1977 choreography, with the sticks, they're trying not to break the sticks and everything. It's like, okay, we get it. We understand. Suspension of disbelief. But I do agree with you. This connects better than Revenge of the Sith.
Can I give you one kind of plausible way you can explain away the duel in A New Hope? The purpose of Obi-Wan wasn't, the purpose of the duels in both Revenge of the Sith and in this one was Obi-Wan trying to take out Anakin. The purpose of the duel in A New Hope is not, Ben's not trying to take out Anakin. He's trying to stall for time.
He's buying time.
He's buying time so Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie can get, and the droids can get away.
And
so he's just keeping it arm's distance.
And he has no intention of winning
that place alive.
Winning as far as
So if you know that you're not, because his intent, even in this one, he says it's one of us is going to go. Is to take out his friend, and I think that goes to another point that I think the show did truly well. Is it finally explained why Ben in the original trilogy was so adamant that his friend was dead. Why he was so adamant that Luke had to go out and take out Vader, because he didn't see Vader as Anakin. He thought Anakin's dead. This is the shell, the monster of a shell that's left of him, and Luke's probably doing a mercy to him by just putting him out of his misery.
Well,
he didn't think that his loved friend was in there anymore.
And the way they did Vader helped with Obi-Wan's a certain point of view explanation to Luke. Doesn't help Luke, but it helped us with him knowing that he's more machine now, that Darth Vader did kill Anakin Skywalker, because Darth Vader says as much in their duel. Now the alarm went off a long time ago, so I want to just get to, however, our last two people. Let's talk about kind of some of the more sillier ones, but how about Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru? Did we really need the explanation of why Uncle Owen walks with a limp in episode 4?
No.
Did you catch it? Do we really need to see him fall and hold his knee because the actor in A New Hope, can't remember his name right off now in hand, but walked with a limp? Did we really need that? But that's just kind of for fun. But it does show that they were trying to bridge some gaps here. Owen and Beru, I thought, first of all, I will say one thing that hits a lot harder now, because I just watched A New Hope a couple days ago, was when Luke says, he said Ben Kenobi. I wonder if he means, or he said Obi-Wan Kenobi. I wonder if he means old Ben Kenobi. And when Owen and Beru look at each other, this hits so much harder. It hit hard after Revenge of the Sith, you know, but it hits harder now. And then also how Beru and Owen are kind of at odds. She's like, he needs to go. His friends are gone. He's got too much of his fight. You can't. I mean, that, and then we got that a little bit of, we could tell there was a difference in Owen and Beru in this Kenobi series, in that where Owen's very much, no, we just need to keep him a farmer, and Beru is more action. So I thought they did I think this series did a great job at making them more valuable characters and making those scenes in The New Hope hit harder.
Very much. I think we talked about how like they're not like sort of these cardboard cutout, overbearing. Oh, no, you're not going to do that just because I'm a stick in the mud. And now it's like you see the rationale and the reasoning behind it, which is that they genuinely love Luke.
But also, I don't want it lost that the minute that Luke utters the name Obi-Wan, that's when Owen and Beru know that the door is open, the cat is out of the bag. When Obi-Wan says the future will take care of itself, at the end, that's what just happened here. That now becomes a pivotal moment in the hero's journey, because he has recognized that there is this person out there whose name is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's like they can't protect him any longer. Sorry, Dave, I stepped on you there.
I was done. Fredo?
No, I agree. I actually, in a weird way, almost wish we had gotten a bit more of Owen and Beru, because we only get mostly Owen in the first chapter, and then we get him in the last two, particularly in the finale. I think it allows, yes, we said it before, it allows us to get a bit more complex take on two characters who have been secondary but who play such a pivotal role. I love the like I said, the ride or die nature of Aunt Beru about, okay, we got bad people coming. Okay, let's get ourselves ready. We know what's going to happen. We're going to protect our home. But it was also, I wish we got a bit more of their relationship with Luke, even though that's not the story.
And
I
Fredo,
really think
you
it's
said it
necessary.
you said it a couple weeks ago. And the thing that really hits harder now as well is that why Owen and Beru are killed in Episode 4. I think you're spot on that it wasn't. I think that was of kind of their own doing, because Luke just mentioned Obi-Wan a couple days ago. Now the Empire's knocking on our door,
Yeah,
and get the guns. Here we go. It wasn't, you got
the droid.
droids. No, we don't got droids. All right, well, we'll get you paid back for lying to us. I think you're 100% correct.
Yeah, it creates a new dynamic where you see their deaths not as accidental along Luke's journey. It's more of a sacrifice. They're willingly sacrificing themselves for the boy they raised, that they help bring up, knowing full well that at some point somebody like Riva, somebody's gonna knock at the door one day looking to do him harm, and that they may have to lay down their lives for him. And when the Empire comes looking for 3PO and R2, that's what they think is happening. So, and in a way, they're not wrong. Because if they had found 3PO and R2 at the homestead, they'd all be dead, including Luke. So uh, it's a new way of redefining that relationship that I think this show does really well for them, because it gives them more agency, and even in their own final act.
If the series gave us nothing else than other than that, I would say that the series is worth it, because that is such an enriching thing, and this is really emotionally affecting for me as a parent. To understand that that they gave themselves up willingly, to try to protect their son. Yeah, it gets me emotional. But I have a couple other quick fire stuff things if we want to
Go
run
for
through
it.
them.
Go for it.
Okay.
Nope.
We got more of the Inquisitors. Like, yeah, like prior to this series ever starting, I think like we all would have been like high five.
And there
more
was no
Inquisitors.
helicopter lightsaber.
Yes, you didn't have to
BS.
deal with the helicopter lightsaber thing.
That would have made me
Like,
sad.
we got more John Williams. John Williams came back and he gave us the Obi-Wan theme, which always cause
But
for celebration.
how? Yeah, okay, I get. But however, it has been a lot of people have thought that he did the entire series, and that is not the case. That there was a let's not forget a young female composer who did majority of it. John Williams wrote one little bit. So, not taking away anything from John Williams, but a lot of people thought that because he wrote that one little bit, he did everything. So, anyway,
Okay, it's Natalie Holt.
yeah,
Let's name drop her,
yes,
okay? Because again, like you said, to your point, let's not forget that she was involved in this. She was the primary composer for the series. But again, John Williams' work got in here, and the man just retired again. And you know he's getting older by the day, so it's like we should take as much John Williams as we can get. Um, Negatives. Ship speed and hyperspace stuff is still kind of murky. It might be murkier than it's ever been.
I get you, but here's
Yeah,
again, I explained why one of the things I think works, but
right.
here's another thing is like there's a difference between jumping the light speed going from New York to L.A. and jumping from light speed to go from New York to Newark. You know what I mean? It's like we don't know how close to Tatooine Obi-Wan was when he, bolted into lightspeed to get to Tatooine to help Luke. So, but
I had a problem that ship had the capability to jump into hyperspace in the first place because like that was a plot point at the beginning of the episode. We can't get into hyperspace, and it's like, again, I know you're trying to protect all these people. You can't fit them all on that tiny little ship, but still, you got a tiny little ship with hyperspace capability, like tucked away in your hold. I mean, come on, let's start doing some calculus here. So like that stuff, like yeah, it was a little bit teeth gnashy for me. Um, are we stuck in the volume? Because some people complain about the effects. They work just fine for me. But some people have complained that things look constrained as a general rule, as if people are in a a little set area, which they
well,
are.
but they have been. I mean, it's like
Mm-hmm.
all of the movies that they grew up on were on a soundstage with blue screen. So the volume is just better than blue screen. So it's like nothing has really
Yeah.
changed, and we're also assuming that the volume is like I don't know this small little screen. So
If we take the theory that the volume has its limitations, and then we go from that, are they going to fall into this habit of just using it too much? You know, like that was the critique of the prequels, right? Too much CGI, too
yeah,
much blue screen.
well, but then everybody makes fun of practical effects, real sets. It's like you can't win. You
You
can't
really can't.
Yeah.
win. I again, I don't see this as any different than using blue screen, green screen, um, except that it's better and the technology is only going to get better
Mhm.
because that's what history tells us. So I don't feel constrained. I mean, again, it's like how many movies and shows have we watched? Well, crying out loud, it's like Clerks, great movie, takes place in a quick stop.
Mhm.
So it's about what story are you telling? Are you wanting to see the whole big universe, or do you want the story? So, but I didn't feel constrained. That's just me. So
Mm. Two things
I
I'll
will
mention
say
real quick
one of
before
my.
we
I'm sorry, Fredo. Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, it's good. So I didn't want to let us end without mentioning Tala, the Path, and also Haja, just because I think and it's going to be, we kind of saw somewhat of it in Rebels. We're going to get more of it with Andor. We liked, when we entered episode 4, the Rebel Alliance was established, and everybody kind of went, "Oh my God, okay, they're the rebels," and they're just there. But I love the fact that we're getting to see more of how those disparate people who are not being oppressed by the Empire are coming together. They're being drawn. There's people who are rejecting the Empire. There's people still keeping the idea of the legacy of the Jedi alive, even at great physical threat to them.
but that's one of my nits. I will take the opposite side of this. That's one of my nits of this
Hit
series,
away.
is that there are the original trilogy. Yoda says, "When I am gone, the last of the Jedi you will be." Well, we've just seen a lifeboat with a bunch of, Force. Okay, so yeah, technically there are no other Jedi, but there are a lot of people who can use the Force. We've just established that. Rebels did that as well. We also have left a character alive who knows who Obi-Wan is, where Obi-Wan is, who Luke is, where Luke is. So that's one thing they left.
Who Vader is.
They left a big thread with that, just with that, and so I agree with you, Fredo, but I'll also take the other side where it's like they just added a whole lot more Force people to a universe that we were told that no, it's just Luke, and then he's got to go find, so I don't think it just kind of muddied the waters a little bit with what they had established in the original trilogy.
True. I do think, I mean, in some ways, I mean, that seems to me to point towards an eventual Riva show. If, the idea of, extending that story, following that thread, because you're right, it's too big of a plot point to just linger there untouched.
Hand to
Uh,
God, I thought Obi-Wan was going to slice her down.
mhm.
Or Owen was going to shoot her or something, that because one of these, she's too dangerous to be left alive, and have that line come back from Mace Windu or something. But
Yeah.
I was surprised that they let that go.
Yeah, no, I think if they wanted to pursue the idea of Riva trying to make amends, and that's one of those things that I do love about it, because she was the one, we said it before, she was the one character who broke the cycle of trauma. Uh, so if we want to see her pursue that path or pursue the path with the Inquisitors behind her, I'm sure they could bring everybody back for that. I would say though, in some ways, I mean, yeah, we've been kind of stuck on the line from Yoda about the last of the Jedi Luke would be, but at the same time, that's like saying, okay, all these guys are cosplayers. Oh, but these guys are 501st. You
Yeah,
know,
no,
you know,
I
yeah,
get you. I get you.
not all are the same. So sometimes you can end up with some dynamics where,
Well,
yeah, the more story they tell us, the more the lines out of the original trilogy are going to come back and go, wait, was that really as adamant, as certain as they made it out to be?
I'm gonna say my problem is the same. I have the same problem with Rebels. That it's like we got. It's not just that we have somebody who can found out that they can move a rock, but we have a trained Jedi in Ezra Bridger running around at the same time as Luke is learning about the Force, and we're thinking that, and we've been told that Luke is the last. So I think this is another episode that we need to have here, but because this is hitting on some things here. So, um, Dave, you
The
have any
whole
other
show,
loose threads?
the whole chosen one theme too. It's like, who's the actual chosen one? Within the context of this story now, because it's just all sort of, you know, um,
It's
a
Neville
little less.
Longbottom.
It's a little less cut and dried than it all was when we
Did you
when we
say
were
Neville
watching these
Longbottom?
movies back in the '80s. Neville, oh goodness. Um,
Well,
Well, I tell you what.
what about grades? Maybe are we going to grade this thing? Because are we going to say, kind of put some definitive stamp on this series as a whole?
I remember. I mean, I don't want to get too hyperbolic, but I mean, I will say I'm not gonna give it a grade, but it is my favorite of all the Star Wars stuff that we've gotten on Disney Plus so far.
I would agree with that, but I also think it benefits from the fact that it's a completed story. I think because both Mandalorian, I mean, maybe you can say Book of Boba Fett, but that's just connecting towards Mandalorian. So I think since that story's still running, we don't know where it's going to end up. It could still come from the back and just take over and just, end up being the best. But for right now, yeah, Obi-Wan, it's a complete, perfectly told tale.
I think that's fair, a fair caveat, because I got to say, the thing that drives me nuts about people like trying to evaluate this series on a weekly basis is just that. It's not a complete story. Um, and so a lot of people that have had a negative reaction to this series have just been like, well, I didn't like that episode, so this series sucks. And then they may or may not circle back to it, and it's like, well, look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
Looking at the whole picture, um, I got as emotional with this series as any Star Wars that I've gotten emotional with since Last Jedi, easily.
Isn't it funny? You
Mhm.
and I have both stumbled on saying movie when we meant
Yeah.
series. I think that says something. But keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that too. Like, would it have been better as a movie? And I don't want to go down that road either, especially since we're up against time. But
We got
it's
yeah.
it's very cinematic in nature. It's a very self-contained story. In it, it's highly emotional. Um, I think it does a fabulous job of sort of tying these two trilogies together. Um, and I like, honestly, if you would like put together a bullet list in January or in March of like, what do you want to see from the Obi-Wan series? And I don't even know if we did an episode like that, but if we had done one like that, I think like we would have just checked everything off the list for me. I got no complaints here. I think probably my favorite Star Wars television since Rebels. I'm not prepared to say it's above Rebels. Um, Rebels, Mandalorian, Obi-Wan are all pretty even. I like all three of those series quite a bit.
See, and my take, I mean, I would agree with you that Mandalorian, Rebels, and Obi-Wan are pretty close. But Rebels and Mandalorian, and of course they have more episodes, but they had more of those. With all due respect, they had the Frog Lady episode, you know, whereas I didn't feel like in this series we had a Frog Lady episode. Everything was propelling forward. I didn't feel like we had to stop and catch our breath and look around and just have a fun episode. I didn't feel like we needed that. Um, so, and maybe
Remember,
that.
Aaron?
What's that?
Remember, Aaron? Yeah, I was gonna say the Frog Lady episode was episode 4 when they broke into Fortress Inquisitorius. That's the one that people complain about. Oh, I can't believe this episode. It's like you got exactly what you wanted. You got a
See, and I
kick-ass,
I,
you
I didn't I didn't
episode.
see that as the Frog Lady episode at all. I didn't see that as so like Rebels has that. I don't want to say filler episodes, but those episodes where we just kind of take a break from the main storyline that they don't make sense until after you watch the entire season, and even
Mhm.
then you have to kind of do some mental gymnastics to make it fit. It's like
Argo.
so, but so I
I,
would put Obi-Wan above those two.
and I think to Fredo's point, it's simply I don't know if we're in the minority necessarily, but we're definitely not unanimously in a position where Star Wars fans unanimously think that this series was tightly edited and there wasn't some material that could up on the editing floor.
You know,
And so, like, for the three of us, the series was better in a lot of respects, in that way than like you said, Rebels or Mandalorian. But um, yeah, I mean, those contrasting opinions are out there, and it's fair to acknowledge them. But I loved this series, man.
like I said, I told you the other night that last episode especially hit so hard. So anyway, well, I
Mhm.
tell you what, we've rambled on probably far long enough on this. So let us know what you think. What questions were answered for you by watching Obi-Wan? What head scratchers do you still have? Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know. Um, but until then, I guess we'll see you next week. Everybody say who dat?
Who dat?
Happy birthday, Sion.
Yeah, and make sure if anybody has lesions or open sores, don't go rub against them. So yeah, that's just a
Who dat?
good rule to live by. So Anyway,
That's another week of handy tips with Uncle Aaron.
that's right. Don't touch open sores. All right, everybody, have a great week. We'll see you later.
McConkey.